on a quiet summer evening, in a middle-class neighborhood tucked away on the edge of the city, something unthinkable happened. A mother called 911 with panic in her voice. Her daughter, only 13 years old, had not come home from school. She always came straight home, never stayed late, never wandered off. Police treated it like a routine missing child case. Posters were printed. Social media alerts went out. Volunteers gathered. The mother, red-eyed but composed, begged for help on the news. She said her daughter was a quiet girl, smart, not the type to run away. She was last seen leaving school alone, wearing her usual faded jeans, a blue hoodie, and her old backpack. For the first few days, the story barely made headlines. Another missing teen, another worried parent. But then came the first clue. A bus driver came forward. He had seen the girl board the city bus after school. Not her usual route, and she was with someone. The CCTV footage was grainy but clear enough to be disturbing. The girl was not alone. A man was with her, mid-30s, scruffy beard, cap pulled low. He had one hand on her shoulder as they walked toward the back of the bus. She did not resist. She looked uncertain, but not frightened. That detail puzzled the detectives. They traced the bus route. They checked every stop. At one point, both the girl and the man got off. That stop led to a wooded area behind a construction site. K9 units were sent in. Drones hovered overhead, and on the third day they found something. It was the girl's backpack, half buried under leaves torn at the side. Her books were missing. Her water bottle was crushed, and next to it, something worse, a single blood-stained sock. This changed everything. The case went from a missing child to a possible abduction, or worse. Police issued an Amber Alert. The media took notice, and the mother's face was everywhere now, on billboards, on talk shows, in teary interviews. "Please," she said again and again, "if anyone has her, just let her go. She's only a child." But the man on the bus, he had vanished. No one recognized him. He had not used credit cards. He was not from the area, at least not officially. But someone had seen him before. A local waitress remembered his face, said he had come in a week earlier asking strange questions, asking about nearby schools. That tip turned the case. Investigators followed the lead to a nearby motel, tucked between the freeway and a gas station. The manager said he had checked in alone, paid cash, barely spoke. Room 103. When police entered the room, it was empty, but the bed was unmade, food wrappers on the floor, and in the trash, a piece of paper with the girl's name written on it, over and over, like someone had been practicing her name, or obsessing over it. Then they found the camera, a cheap handheld camcorder. The footage inside made one officer leave the room. The man had filmed her, hours of it, her sitting on the bed, crying, then silent, then just staring at the wall. And then the footage ended abruptly. They were too late, and yet the case was far from over. The discovery of the camera footage changed the tone of the investigation. What began as a hopeful search had now twisted into a psychological nightmare. Forensics took over the motel room. The girl's fingerprints were found on the bed frame, the lamp, even on the window glass, suggesting she had tried to escape. But the most chilling find wasn't the footage or the fingerprints. It was a piece of string tied to the underside of the bed. Attached to it was a small cloth doll. It looked hand-stitched. The doll wore a blue hoodie and faded jeans, exactly like what the girl had worn when she disappeared. Detectives now faced a deeper question. Who was this man, and what did he want? They ran the motel registry against missing person cases, registered offenders, transient workers, and truck stop records. After several long days, a partial match surfaced. A man named Marcus, a drifter who had been in and out of psychiatric care, known for obsessional behaviors. Last seen 6 months ago after being discharged with minimal supervision. They traced him to an abandoned farm 40 miles outside the city. Surveillance drones spotted movement inside the barn. It was time to move. Police moved in with a full tactical unit, guns drawn. No mistakes allowed. They breached the barn just before sunrise. What they found was worse than they feared. Inside the barn was a makeshift room, plywood walls, a single mattress, faded posters on the wall, and in the corner a shrine. Photos of the girl, clipped from her social media accounts, printed and taped in neat rows, candles. Even her school yearbook photo, laminated and framed. But there was no sign of the girl herself. Marcus was there, standing calmly in the center of the room, hands up, silent. He was arrested without incident. During questioning, Marcus barely spoke. He would mutter sometimes, repeat sentences. At one point, he leaned in and whispered to the detective, "She lives in my dreams now." Interrogators tried to push. They offered deals, pleaded for the girl's location, but Marcus smiled, said she had crossed over, said she was safe with the angels. The interview room went silent after that, with Marcus in custody, but the girl still missing. Pressure mounted. The public demanded answers. Reporters camped outside the station. Candlelight vigils were held every night. And the mother, now drained and silent, stopped giving interviews. But then came a miracle. A local man walking his dog through the hills noticed something strange in an old storm drain. A flicker of color. A faint sound. He leaned down, called out. No answer. He called again, a girl's voice, whimpering. Police and rescue crews arrived fast. They pried open the rusted metal bars and pulled her out. She was cold, bruised, but alive. She had been locked inside the drain for nearly 5 days. The details she gave next made the entire country tremble. The hospital room where the girl lay was quiet, but not peaceful. Monitors beeped steadily. A nurse checked her vitals every hour. Police officers stood just outside the door watching silently. And her mother sat beside the bed holding her hand, tears running down her face. The girl didn't speak for a day. She slept, drank water, ate slowly. Doctors said she had dehydration, mild frostbite, and bruises around her wrists and ankles from being restrained. But the real damage, they said, was psychological. On the second night, she finally whispered a name, not her abductors, a woman's. Detectives brought in a therapist. Over time, the girl began to talk. Piece by piece, the horror unfolded. She said the man Marcus had taken her to the farm first, told her he was her new guardian, told her the world outside had ended, that her parents had sent him to save her. He fed her cold food, made her wear different clothes, forced her to call him father. When she cried, he would sit silently and watch her. Sometimes he would speak to the walls, saying things like, "She's almost ready," or "They'll be proud of me this time." But then one night, he brought someone else, a woman. She was older, with gray, streaked hair and a long coat. She never gave her name. She walked slowly around the room, inspecting the girl, then nodded, whispered something to Marcus, and left. That same night, the girl was tied up and driven for hours. No lights, no music, just the hum of the engine. When the vehicle finally stopped, she was dragged into the woods and placed in the storm drain, alive, but barely able to move. He left her with a flashlight and a single bottle of water, then closed the grate. He said the angels would find me, she whispered. The detectives were stunned. Marcus had acted alone, or so they thought. But now it was clear someone else was involved, possibly more than one. They went back through the evidence, the footage, the doll, the motel guest book. Then they noticed something they had missed, a signature on the motel registry, the name M. Green. But Marcus's name wasn't Green, and the handwriting didn't match. The signature matched another record, one from a halfway house 2 states away. A woman who had once been institutionalized for abducting children from parks, then letting them go days later. She had vanished months ago. Authorities had assumed she was dead or homeless. Now, she had a face, a name, and a new target. Detectives feared the case was not over. It was only beginning. The woman's name was Margaret Green, once a teacher, later diagnosed with a dissociative condition after a traumatic loss. Her record was long but buried beneath years of transfers between psychiatric facilities and shelters. She had been forgotten, until now. Her last known location was a nursing home she checked out of under false identity. No one reported her missing. No one noticed when she vanished. She had learned how to disappear, and now it seemed she had returned, with purpose. Detectives now had a new lead. They reopened several missing child cases from the past 5 years. Girls between the ages of 10 and 14, all with a similar pattern, vanished after school. Last seen with a stranger, few leads, no resolutions, and in 2 of those cases, someone had left behind a strange doll, handmade, detailed, dressed like the missing girl. The resemblance was chilling. They were dealing with a pair, Marcus and Margaret, possibly more. The girl, now recovering slowly, provided more insight. She remembered the woman speaking in rhymes, whispering prayers, touching her hair and saying, "They won't hurt you if you're quiet." She said Margaret had called her a gift and that someone was waiting for her. That phrase echoed, "Someone is waiting." The FBI joined the case. Behavioral analysts believed this was not just a kidnapping. It was part of a larger ritual, a belief system twisted and delusional, possibly involving others who shared the same obsession. They raided Marcus's childhood home. In the basement, behind a locked storage door, they found boxes of journals, page after page of drawings, maps, temptables, and names. Most were scratched out, but one name wasn't. A girl who had disappeared 3 years ago, her body never found. Detectives followed the trail to an old cabin upstate. The place hadn't been touched in years. Dust covered everything. But on the back wall of the bedroom, carved into the wood, was the same phrase repeated 20 times. "She lives in the in-between." Police searched the grounds. Dogs sniffed, drones scanned. Near a dry creek they found it, a shallow grave, bones, torn fabric, a child's shoe. Forensic teams confirmed it, the girl from 3 years ago. Another victim. They now knew Marcus and Margaret had been active for years, operating under a belief that they were saving children, preserving them from the world, offering them to something. But the question remained, who else knew, and where was Margaret now? The search for Margaret Green became a nationwide alert. Her face was on every major news outlet, her description broadcast across state lines. But she had vanished without a trace. No bank activity, no known relatives, no digital footprint. It was as if she had melted into the very shadows she came from. But evil has a pattern, and patterns leave traces. 1 month after the last discovery, another child went missing. A 12-year-old girl from a small town 3 hours away. The case was almost identical. Left school, never came home. Last seen alone near the library, no witnesses, no security footage. But this time, the police were ready. The moment the report came in, they combed every camera, every corner. One blurry shot showed a woman in a long coat crossing the street minutes before the disappearance. The coat was familiar. They checked local hotels, buses, shelters. At a nearby bus depot, they got lucky. A staff member remembered a woman matching the description. Gray hair, long coat, polite voice. She had purchased a one-way ticket to a remote coastal town, paid in cash. FBI agents swarmed the town the next morning. They questioned shopkeepers, gas station workers, even fishermen. Most said they hadn't seen anyone like her, until they reached a small church, abandoned years ago. Inside, they found signs of recent activity. Blankets, food wrappers, a chair placed at the center of the altar, candles, all burnt to the base, and a mural on the wall, painted in red. Children holding hands, eyes closed, smiling. And in the corner of the room, sitting quietly, was Margaret. She didn't run, didn't speak, just looked up and smiled. "They're safe now," she said. "No more pain." Agents arrested her immediately, but the horror didn't end there. During the investigation, they uncovered several letters, sealed, addressed, and ready to send. Each one had a name, a date, and instructions. To take a child them, to protect them from the world. The letters had been sent before. Some recipients had acted, others had ignored them. Some, investigators believed, were still out there, waiting. Margaret and Marcus were just two members of something darker, something older. A group built on twisted faith, secrecy, and ritual. The public never learned the full truth. Officials gave a statement, called it an isolated case, said justice was served. But behind closed doors, a task force was formed, quietly, permanently, to track the unseen. Because evil does not end, it only sleeps, and sometimes it wakes up again. Courtroom was packed. Journalists lined the back walls. Families of victims sat quietly, holding photos, tissues, and in some cases, each other. Margaret Green was led in wearing a beige prison jumpsuit, hands cuffed, her face blank. She did not look around. She did not speak, only stared straight ahead. The trial began with the usual procedures. Charges were read aloud: kidnapping, conspiracy, unlawful confinement, psychological torture, and accessory to murder. The list seemed endless. Each count carried decades in prison. But she remained silent. When it was her turn to speak, her defense attorney stood up. He said his client had suffered long-term untreated delusions, that she had experienced extreme trauma and had built an alternate reality in her mind, one where her crimes made sense. The prosecution did not allow this narrative to breathe. They played the footage, displayed the dolls, shared the girls' medical reports, and then, in a move that silenced the courtroom, they showed the drawings from the basement shrine. Hand-drawn faces of children, all smiling, all surrounded by flames. "These are not the works of a mentally broken woman," the prosecutor said. "These are the signatures of evil." The girl who survived did not testify in person, but her voice was heard through a recorded statement. In it, she described the fear, the darkness, the whispers at night, the chanting, and the way Margaret would gently pat her head and say, "They will come for you in your dreams." When the recording ended, the courtroom was completely still. After weeks of testimony, the jury took just 4 hours to decide. Guilty, on all counts. The judge sentenced her to multiple life terms, no possibility of parole. But something unexpected happened before she was taken away. Margaret stood up. She looked directly at the mother of the rescued girl, and for the first time in the entire trial, she spoke. "They chose her," she said, "and they're not done choosing." The guards pulled her away, but the words echoed in the minds of everyone present. In the months that followed, investigators kept digging. More letters were found, more patterns uncovered. Other names began surfacing: drifters, forgotten hospital patients, missing persons who might have re-emerged under new identities. Some leads led nowhere. Others led to shallow graves. The rescued girl underwent therapy, moved with her mother to another state, changed her name. But her life was never the same. Nightmares came often. Loud noises made her flinch. She rarely went outside alone. One day, her therapist asked her what she feared the most. She replied, "That they'll remember me." When asked who they were, she wouldn't answer. 6 months after Margaret Green was locked away, something happened that shook the quiet town where the surviving girl now lived. A package arrived at her new school. There was no return address. Inside was a small wooden box, hand-carved. The school staff assumed it was a gift or an art project. But when the principal opened it, he froze. Inside was a doll. Not just any doll. It wore the exact school uniform of the girl. Same hair, same shoes, same pattern of the small scar on her chin. On its chest, stitched carefully in black thread, was her new name. The school was evacuated. Police arrived. The FBI was notified. Surveillance footage showed a man dropping off the package just before dawn. His face was hidden, his movements deliberate. This changed everything. It meant someone had found her again. Someone knew her identity, her location, her life. Agents moved her and her mother to a safe house. New state, new names, new schools again. But the fear was growing, not just in the girl, but in law enforcement too. The letters Margaret had written weren't just theories. They were blueprints, instructions, commands, and they were still in motion. Behind the scenes, a task force expanded, codenamed Silent Branch. Its goal was to hunt the network Margaret belonged to, those who believed they were called to save children by removing them from society, locking them away in places they called sanctuaries. In reality, those sanctuaries were graves, basements, drains, barns. Each month brought new leads. One in particular came from a former psychiatric nurse who recognized Margaret's drawing style from an old patient she had once treated in Arizona. The patient, a quiet man who used to collect antique dolls, had vanished years ago after being released. When agents raided his last known location, they found a shed filled with dozens of dolls. Each had a name, a birth date, and under their feet, a word carved into the wood freed. The list grew, so did the fear. The girl, now 14, began writing everything down. Every dream, every shadow, every sound. Her therapist encouraged her to speak the fears instead of bottling them. But one night she drew something instead. It was a symbol, a tree with no leaves, its roots tangled into a face. When asked where she had seen it, she said, "Margaret showed it to me. Said they'd plant this symbol wherever one of us is chosen." Authorities checked old crime scenes. That symbol had been there all along, carved into the back of the barn, etched under the storm drain, painted behind the church altar. It was a mark, a warning, or a countdown. The symbol, the leafless tree with the hidden face, was no longer just a detail. It was the signature of something older, something organized. Silent Branch assigned cryptographers, cult analysts, and archivists to dig into its origins. At first, they thought it was unique to the Green case, a delusion created by disturbed minds. But then, an academic reached out, a retired professor of folklore who had been following the case closely. He had seen the symbol before. In 1962, a similar case had surfaced in rural Maine. 3 children vanished, only one returned. She described the people under the earth and a symbol carved into a cellar wall, a tree without leaves. Her family relocated. She never spoke of it again. In 1979, a woman in Germany claimed a secret group had tried to take her son for the awakening. When police raided the home she identified, they found maps, children's clothing, and a wood carving of a tree with twisted roots and hidden eyes. Over the next weeks, the team uncovered more, dozens of obscure cases, all with similar elements. A missing child, a shrine, a tree, a voice whispering, "They're ready." Margaret Green and Marcus weren't the founders. They were only followers, recruits. The symbol was their link to something far more extensive, a hidden collective known only through fragmented writings as the Rooted Ones. Members believed that certain children were keys, that modern society had poisoned childhood, and these chosen ones must be hidden away until a time called the Blooming, a moment when the world would reset, and only the pure could survive. It sounded absurd, until a locked journal found in Marcus's belongings referenced coordinates. A team was sent to the location, a stretch of forest that crossed state lines. Deep in the woods, they found an underground chamber, sealed, old, carved with the same symbol. Inside were beds, toys, writing on the walls from children, but no people, no bones, no scent, just emptiness. A list, a long one, names, ages, dates, some crossed out, some marked with a circle. At the very bottom, in a darker ink, one name stood alone, the girl who had survived. Next to her name was a single word, return. The word return, Next to her name was more than a threat, a vow to the task force. It confirmed what they feared. She wasn't just a survivor. She was a target, not for revenge, but for recovery. To them, she still belonged. Security around the girl was heightened. She could no longer attend school, could no longer use the internet, couldn't walk near windows or speak to strangers. Her life was shrinking. Silent branch agents moved her and her mother again, deeper underground, into a classified location with no connection to the outside world. She didn't cry. She didn't ask questions. She just whispered, "They're close." Then 3 days later, the drawings returned, taped to a tree outside a school in another state. A sketch of a little girl with hollow eyes and stitched lips. Under it, the leafless tree. In the alley behind a daycare, same symbol. In a child's backpack in Wyoming, same drawing folded, hidden in a book. None of the children were harmed. Not yet. But the message was clear. They were everywhere. Members of the rooted ones had begun to surface. Not with violence, but with influence. They worked quiet jobs, drove delivery trucks, volunteered at shelters, waited. Their goal wasn't chaos. It was preparation. Each agent that tracked a lead came back with fragments. One found a letter hidden in a library book. "The soil is almost ready." Another discovered a cassette in a thrift store, children chanting in soft, rhythmic tones. And then came a breakthrough. One undercover operative, posing as a transient, made contact with someone who mentioned the blooming. A woman, quiet, old. She spoke in riddles, but said one sentence that chilled the agent to the bone. "The one who got away must return, or the forest will burn." She described the girl perfectly. Not just her appearance, but her voice, her laugh, even a scar no one had reported publicly. The girl was more than a target.